Nick Whitney.
Thank you. All right, guys, welcome. I'm excited to share EOS with you guys. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So we're going to talk about today. We're going to get real. We're going to keep it simple and show you how to get results. Let's start. Keeping it real. About EOS. EOS was started by Gino Wickman. Gino wrote a book called Traction. This is a book that I embraced about 10 years ago, incorporated into my business. So Gino has an interesting story. He was called upon to turn around his family business at a young age. And like many family businesses, it was chaos. It was messy. And he was able to cobble together some different tools and disciplines to get things back on track. As he started becoming a leader in business in his area, he joined EO, the entrepreneurial organization, not to be confused with EOS, and he learned that other leaders were facing the same issues that his company did. So he started working with them and implementing the tools that he had built for his business, grew those tools, and eventually launched EOS worldwide. And today, there are now over 100,000 businesses across the world using tools, EOS tools in their business. There are 650 other people like me who help small to medium-sized businesses implement these tools to create vision, traction, and healthy. Vision from the standpoint of everyone in the organization knows where they're going and how they're going to get there. Traction is executing against that vision with discipline and accountability. And healthy is building healthy teams. So that's what I do. And real quick, we're going to talk about companies that run on EOS. These are privately held companies, typically from 10 to 250 employees, whose leadership team wants more out of their business. They know what got them to where they are isn't going to be to get them to where they want to go. They fear the status quo more than they fear change. They're the hero of the story, right? And these entrepreneurs get in business for freedom. And they want, there's 4 different types of freedoms that they go after when they're in business. You have freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, freedom of purpose. Early on, as entrepreneurs, what we learn is those freedoms do not happen early on. You don't have freedom of time. Your time is in your business. Your time is not, they want to leave the boss. They hate people telling them what to do, but your customers, your employees are dictating how your time is spent. There's definitely no freedom of money. Early on, we're bootstrapping, we're raising money for our business. All of our business is tied to our enterprise. We don't have freedom of relationships early on, right? Not only personal relationships, more importantly in this context, professional relationships. They're working with customers that they don't necessarily enjoy being around. They're working with people that they don't necessarily enjoy being around. And finally, they don't have freedom of purpose, right? All of us get into business to go after a cause, a passion greater than ourselves, a reason for being outside of making money. And we're not able to accomplish that because we're tied to our business. So that's where I come in. And what I do is I teach the EOS tools, right? Every business has 6 major components that you have to be strong in to be successful. You have your vision, where you're going, how you're going to get there. You have people, the people component, making sure you have the right people for your unique organization who will execute that vision. You have data, right? Using facts and figures to make decisions. You have issues. Once you're strong with your vision, people, and data, issues become transparent. They're smoked out. There's nowhere to hide. The 5th component is process. How do you systemize your business for scalability, for replicability? And the 6th key component is traction. That is executing your vision with discipline, executing your vision with accountability, building that muscle memory into your company. So I'm going to go around another time and kind of get a little more detail about what these are in the EOS world. So we'll start with vision. So vision, we start off with answering 8 questions. 8 very simple questions that take a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge to get right. So we organize all of that in what we call the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. This is a one-page strategic plan that will allow your company to level up and achieve goals. It's a front and a back. So we start off with core values, right? Identifying the behaviors, identifying the mindset of the people in your organization who epitomize who you want to be, the identity. How do we use these core values to hire, fire, retain, reward, recognize people in the company? The next is core focus. There's two parts of a core focus, right? There's your purpose, passion, cause. One of those, the reason why you're in business outside of making money, and the niche. What do you actually do to make money? Then we have a 10-year target, right? Jim Collins calls this the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Don't get hung up on the years. Some of my clients have a 5-year target, some will have a 15 or 20, but the bottom line is this is the guiding light. This is where this is the pinnacle of the mountain that you're trying to get to. And it has to be aggressive, has to be motivating, and it's how a lot of decisions are made from executing your vision. Then we hit marketing strategy. The marketing strategy is 4 components. We have 1, your target market. Who are your ideal customers? The demographic, geographic, psychographic. The second component is the 3 uniques. What differentiates you? What 3 items separate you from the competition? Proven process is next. This is exactly what it's like to do business with you, a visual representation. And I will share with you guys mine, just so you see what I'm talking about. Here, pass those on if you don't mind. This is the customer journey. This is what it's like to do business with me, an EOS Implementer. And then a guarantee, right? So many objections of doing business. Owners think, leaders think it's due to price, right? If you are giving the right message to your target market, then price should not be an actual objection. Typically, there is lack of uncertainty and a risk associated with that. So if you have a guarantee that mitigates that risk of doing business with you, then you've overcome many of the objections. Next up, 3-year picture. 3 years from now, where do you want your business to be 3 years from now? In EOS, we don't believe in very detailed Gantt charts, very detailed strategic plans, because we're in a changing world. But we do need to go in the right direction. So the 3-year picture that we look for is, what's your revenue going to be? Take a shot in the dark. What are the profits? What are the key measurables? Most importantly, what does it look like? 3 years from now, how is the business going to evolve and grow? Are there new geographic locations? How many employees do you have? What seats do you need to fill with those employees? Kind of a high-level view of, this is what we need to do to achieve our 3-year picture. Make sure everyone shares that picture. On the back side, so we started at the top, now we're working our way to the ground. We're on the vision side, this is the traction side. So, our 1-year plan. 1 year from now, this is where the rubber meets the road. 1 year from now, what do we need to accomplish to be on pace for our 3-year picture? To be on pace for our 10-year target? What are the 3 to 7 most important goals? The most important things we have to accomplish? Less is more, right? As we all know, focus is the key to achieving results. So if you identify the top 3 to 7 things that you must accomplish, you better accomplish those, and your likelihood increases significantly if you only have a handful of things. So you're not trying to work on everything. Then we break it down even further. Rocks. Rocks are 90-day priorities. Over the next 13 weeks, these are the most important things we are working on. We're going to ignore all the other stuff for now. We'll get to them, but right now, these are the 3 to 7, hopefully closer to 3, things that we have to do to move our business forward. And then the last one is issues. Issues are obstacles, they're opportunities, they're things that you need to discuss in order to achieve your vision. These are our conscious choices of things we're not working on right now, but we need to work on in the future. Creating this list is therapeutic. It gets it out of your head onto paper, and And it allows a single spot for people to address things that they're a little bit worried about that could be an obstacle. So those are the 8 questions. Now there's nothing worse than a strategic plan that we spend hours and hours working on and it goes up on a shelf. So the second discipline to a strong vision is making sure it's shared by everyone, shared by all. There's some different ways to do that I work with my clients on. My favorite is a state of a company address, where once a quarter you have an all-hands meeting and you bring everyone up to speed on where you've been as an organization, where you are, and where you're going. Using that VTO, that Vision Traction Organizer, as the key. And that's what 100% Strong looks like. So the next component of your business is people. When we talk about people in the right seats. Right people are those individuals who share the core values that we talked about before. Right seats is the structure of your organization. Structure should always come first. So often I see organizations that create their organizational chart based off the talent that they already have, right? They place people, they create seats to fit the unique abilities of their people. That's okay for the short term, but that is not conducive to getting companies to the next level. So that's why at EOS we talk about the accountability chart. This is an organizational chart on steroids. And it's under the belief that there are 3 major functions in any company. There's your sales and marketing function, your operations function, and your finance and administrative function. Each one of these needs to be clearly identified in a leader that can take it up to the next level. Now, this is customizable, so sales and marketing might split into 2 distinct functions. Operations might split into 2 or 3. Finance might split off into IT, HR, etc. But at the helm is an integrator. The integrator is running the day-to-day of the business, right? They're holding each of these people accountable. They're facilitating teamwork. They are supposed to be in boxes, as I see on the screen. They're gray on my screen, but it looks like there's words floating in the air up there. The integrator is very detail-oriented. They're not afraid to have the hard conversation. And the last part is the visionary. The visionary is typically the founding member of the company, right? They are very much creative driven. They have 20 great ideas. They're big into problem solving. They're big into culture. Now, one thing that we see is when we have a visionary trapped in the integrator seat, the business will have 90 days of great spikes and then come back down, because visionaries are not necessarily overly focused. They like to change direction based on their creative ability. And trying to do that with the organization can be very, very troublesome. So to complete this accountability chart, every single person has 3 to 5 responsibilities that they are accountable for. When something is off track, everyone knows who's responsible for getting it back on track. For example, a marketing and sales leader, right? Revenue generation. They might be responsible for prospecting, for content creation, for the marketing calendar, to hit sales numbers and account management. So when you have this clarity built into an entrepreneurial organization, it allows people to get freedom to achieve these responsibilities. Very powerful. And their name goes in the box. Big thing here is you do not want 2 names in one box, because when 2 people are accountable, no one is accountable. And eventually, we build this out for the whole organization. So there is crystal clear on who does what. Those are the right seats. And when you have the right people in the right seats, the organization is strong, but we have 2 types of issues that'll come up. Number 1 is the right person in the wrong seat. This is someone who lives the core values of the company, but the seat may have outgrown them, or maybe they were never in the right seat to begin with. Now, the good news is, if there is a right seat for them, they can move. But if not, this is where owners tend to struggle a little bit, right? When someone's been with them for a while, the organization has outgrown them, sometimes they have to make hard decisions to let them go. And the other type of issue is a wrong person in the right seat. A wrong person does not live those core values. But typically, they're high producers, they're high performers. They're hitting their numbers, they're crushing their numbers, but they're doing it at the expense of the culture. They're eating away of what the business is trying to build. So it's very important to coach them when appropriate, and exit them if they're not coachable. So that's what 100% strong in the people component looks like. We'll move on to data. Data, we talk about scorecards and measurables. So the important thing about data is having a pulse on your business, right? And having the ability to predict. How do you know if you had a good week, had a good month, had a good quarter? So at EOS, we talk about the scorecard having 13 weeks of data, right? So we have leading indicators as measurables, leading indicators versus lagging indicators, right? What are the predictive metrics, predictive measurables that we look at so we know we're on pace? For example, weekly revenue would be a lagging indicator. What are the activities that lead to weekly revenue, right? Is it number of contracts? Is it number of meetings, number of prospects? We want to focus on those leading indicators to make sure that we're on pace to hit our weekly revenue, because if we're not on pace, that's where we make the change upstream to make sure we hit our numbers downstream. So we look at, we put a goal in place so we know if we're on track or off track to hit. There's a name on here on who is responsible for that measurable. And then we look at 13 weeks of data to look at patterns and trends, so we can solve issues before they become out of control. Here's some examples of measurables that companies will use on their scorecard. And that is 100% strong in the data component. Next up, issues. We talked about it before. When you're strong in these top three components, vision, people, data, there's nowhere to hide. You have a crystal clear organization. People are going to come up and they're going to call the baby ugly. They're going to let you know why the reasons, the obstacles, the opportunities of why you're not achieving your vision. So, issues. First thing, issues list. We talked about that already. When you have a culture of people being open and honest, they will identify these issues. They will bring them to the table and let the leadership team know what's going on. And then we got to solve these things. How we solve issues in EOS is called IDS, right? It stands for identify, discuss, and solve. Identify. At EOS, we're identifying the root cause of the issue. Why is this taking place? We're asking ourselves, why, until we get to that root cause. Now we know the issue we're actually trying to solve. That brings us to discuss. This is where you surround yourself with smart people and come up with potential fixes for the issue, potential solutions, and then you move to solve, right? A solve will result in a 7 to 14 day to-do item, an action item, or maybe a bigger picture, a 90-day rock, what we talked about before. So, you want to guess what most leadership teams do when they're trying to figure something out, when they're trying to solve an issue, is they discuss, and they discuss, and they go in circles, and they go in circles. Rarely do identify the actual root cause. Rarely do they have a solve, or they're holding people accountable for getting things done. So, how does this work in practice? Well, we have our issues list. Do we start at the top and work our way down? The answer is no. We got to prioritize. Our time is very valuable. So when we're solving issues, first thing we do is we identify the top three. 1, 2, 3. All right, number one, Andy S., right seat. Andy S. may not be living up to expectations. All right, let's identify the root cause. Let's discuss ways we can help. And then let's put an action item in to solve. And once it's solved, identify, discuss, solve, it's gone. It's done for good. It moves to an action item that we can hold each other accountable for later. Then we do the same for issue number 2. In this case, the website rock is off track. And same with issue number 3. So that is 100% strong in the issues component. 2 components left. We're getting to Danielle's favorite component, which is process. So process. Every company has a handful of core processes, right? You have an HR process of how you attract and hire and onboard and fire and review people. You have a marketing process. How do you generate leads? How do you build the brand? There's a sales process, right? How do you close those leads and turn them into customers? You'll have a handful of operation processes, 2, 3, 4 different operations processes, depending on the business. There could be a customer service process. There could be an accounting process of how cash moves through an organization. Sherry will be talking about that a little bit, is how to strengthen that accounting process. And what we do is we document and we simplify. My clients for the most part, hate the thought of detailed processes, right? They in their mind, they picture this thick SOP binder with every single little step that needs to happen. That we don't take that approach at EOS. We take the 80-20 approach. We believe in when you have a framework, when you have this tribal knowledge institutionalized through a framework, that'll actually unleash freedom throughout the process, right? Because people don't have to worry about, okay, for example, HR, I don't need to worry about this is how I write a job description, right? That process is there so I can unleash my creativity to making it the best job description it can be. And then finally, in terms of process, once they're documented, we got to make sure they're followed by everyone, right? Processes, just like the strategic plan, are no good when they're sitting on a shelf. It needs to be implemented. So we have some tools to bring these to life, as well as continuous improvement, because the other thing is processes will become stagnant over time. Technology will make them obsolete over time. So what's that continuous improvement process look like to enhance your processes? That's 100% strong in the process component, which brings us to Traction, the name of the book. Traction, we talk about rocks, these 90-day priorities for the organization over time that will work its way down to every individual in the organization having their own rocks, 1 to 3 things that they are focused on to move the business forward. And then meeting pulse, right? Corporate America, small businesses, all the same. People say their meetings suck. This could have been an email. We didn't accomplish anything. And that's where EOS can really, really shine. So we start off, we all live in a 90-day world, right? So you think about the 4 seasons. You think about things like New Year's resolutions. After 90 days, 13 weeks, we're ready to change. We go back to old behavior. So what we do is we're sprinting in the business for 90 days, and we're coming up for air once a quarter to recalibrate, to reset our rocks, to make sure we're still going in the right direction. A day of strategic planning. And then throughout that 90 days, we have what's called a level 10 meeting. Level 10 meeting is a weekly meeting, 90 minutes, and there's 5 rules. Same day, same time, start on time, end on time, same agenda. You guys probably can understand one of the biggest frustrations is meetings that don't start on time because the visionary, right, is not necessarily focused and gets there on time, but they're fleeting, right? They'll go over 15 minutes, a half hour, and that eats into what needs to be done from everyone else, and there can be some animosity that builds up. Same agenda. When I first tell this to people, they're like, Nick, how can you have the same agenda for every meeting? It doesn't make any sense. Like, business changes, and you're right. And the beauty of this agenda is it's reactive, it's adaptive to that change. So we start off by stating good news, right? Studies have shown when you start a meeting off on a positive note, it impacts the rest of the meeting, right? So professionally, personally, what's some good news in your life? 5 minutes. And then it's rapid fire for the next 4 items. Scorecard review, rock review, customer employee headlines, to-do list. This is reporting only. What we're doing is we're looking at our scorecard and we're saying, okay, that 13-week scorecard that I showed you before, what is off track, right? And then do we need to talk about it? If something is off track and whoever is responsible for, right, we have a name in the box. If they say, nope, it was a bad week, I've got this, I'll get it back on track, great, nothing else needs to be done. If they say, no, I need the help of the group to figure out how to get this measurable back on track, then we drop it down the agenda. Talk about that more in a second. Same with the rock review, right? These major priorities, things that we committed to getting done over the next 90 days. Is that off track? Are each of your rocks on track? If they're off track, do we need to talk about it? If we do, we drop it down. Customer employee headlines. These are what's going on with your employees, like and your customers, obviously. But what do we need to know, and then what do we need to talk about? If it's reporting only, cool. Do we need to talk about it? We drop it down. And then there's the to-do list. You guys remember when I talked about the issue solving track, the IDS, the solve? Those solves will often result in a 7 to 14 day action item. This is where that gets captured. Were your to-dos completed, right? If so, we cross it off. If not, do we need to talk about it? If so, we drop it down. When I say drop it down, we're dropping it down to here, to the issues list. If a scorecard measurable is off track, all right, now let's talk about it to get it back on track. We're spending the bulk of the time of the meeting, 60 minutes solving issues. This agenda has been populated by what's going on in the business. We prioritize those and we systematically knock them out until we're out of time. Meeting ends on time, right? We don't solve every issue on the list every single week, and that's okay, because if you're solving the most important things first with an actual solve, you're moving the business forward and you're on your way to achieve your vision. Then finally, we conclude. We conclude with one, recapping to-dos to make sure everyone is aligned with what they committed to. 2 is cascading communication, meaning what did we talk about in our meeting that needs to be communicated to others, customers, or employees, partners, vendors. And then finally, we rate the meeting. We call this a level 10 meeting because we rate it 1 to 10. This is continuous improvement being built into the meeting. And if the meeting is less than a 9, there's a quick headline of why you felt that way, and then you build that in to make the next meeting better. The goal is for every meeting to be rated a 10. So that is 100% strong in the traction component. Those are the 6 key components of EOS. When companies are strong in all 6 of these, they can achieve just phenomenal things. All right, finally, get results. So I teach 20 tools in total, but 5 have the biggest impact. Those are the VTO, that Vision Traction Organizer, the accountability chart, right, to make sure we have the right people in the right seats with clarity of responsibility. Rocks, those are the 90-day priorities of the most important things to work on to move the business forward. Meeting Pulse, right, the 90-day strategic meeting, as well as the weekly level 10 meeting, and the scorecard, 13 weeks of measurables, so we have a pulse on our business, can make better decisions because we're better predictors, and lets us know if we had a good week. And if you want access to any of those, reach out to me. If you're not connected to me on LinkedIn, that's my QR code. And I'll leave you guys with one more thing. It's the EOS life. Right? Remember the freedoms that I talked about before? When companies commit to the Entrepreneurial Operating System, they're able to live the EOS life. And that is doing what you love, with people you love, making a huge difference, being compensated appropriately, and having time to pursue other passions. That's the commitment I make to my customers as we take our journey on together. So that's it. That's EOS.
Thank you.
I think we have time for some questions, I think. Are we good on time?
So going back to an old position that I had, data, and that point that you have there of gathering data that are measurable items. Sometimes the key issues, the key things that you want to work on are more qualitative in nature. Mm-hmm. How do you help companies then identify how to develop measurable results when sometimes it's a qualitative kind of issue?
Yeah, so if you're trying to measure something that's qualitative, that takes a lot of creative thinking, right? And what I do is I facilitate and use the wisdom of the room, because I'm sitting here with the visionary, the integrator, and the head of sales, and the head of finance, and the head of marketing, and they know more about their business, about the industry than I ever will. So I challenge myself to ask them good questions so they can figure that out on their own. Because typically, if it can be solved, and if it's a strong leadership team, there's the right people in those right seats, it's inside of their heads. Through discussion and debate, we can bring that out.
Mm-hmm. Good. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
The level 10 meetings, I'm curious about that. Is that the appropriate time and place to single people out if they're not hitting certain rocks or targets in a group setting, or how is that handled?
Yeah, so when you're talking about folks in the room,
Yep.
if you have a head of sales in the room and sales numbers are off track.
That is correct.
Yep, that is where building healthy teams is the most important part of what I do. It's establishing that trust, making sure that people are vulnerable, and teaching them how to facilitate in a way in these meetings that you're not blaming the person, because we're under the assumption that it's the right person in the right seat. If not, that's a different issue. If they're not hitting their numbers, then we figure out why. Right? We identify the reason why. Is it because is it because of the number of proposals in the pipeline? What's marketing doing? Let's figure out the real bottleneck and then try to solve that issue. So we don't call people out, we call issues out.
Yeah. Well, if they're not hitting the sales numbers, it's always marketing's fault anyway, so.
That symbiotic relationship between marketing and sales, right? I'll tell you what though, like
And ops.
in ops, right? When the relationship between the visionary and the integrator is the most important one in any organization. Making sure that as a visionary, you're bringing in the right integrator to offset your deficiencies. And in the EOS world, when those two are running at a high level, we call that rocket fuel, right? Oxygen and hydrogen, when they work together, they blast off to the moon. That relationship between sales and marketing might be the second most. And then third, it's probably sales and operations. It's
Always conflict.
we're managing, my biggest job is managing human energy. It's to build these teams so that they're empathetic of what others are doing. They understand what others are doing. How many times have you guys worked with a client and they say, I have no idea what this person does on a day-to-day basis, right? Happens all the time. And when we create that accountability chart, then we know. When we create that scorecard, we know if they're performing, and if not, we figure out why. And if it becomes a people issue, then we talk about that too. One of the first things I do, my proven process right here. So the first thing I do is I do a little 90-minute demo, right, to see if it's a good fit. If it's a good fit, we move forward. First thing we do is the execution, right? We're jumping on a moving train. Let's implement some of these tools to help drive accountability and discipline. Cool. Next up, we build the vision. We start answering those 8 questions that I talked about on the VTO. One of the first things I do once we come up with core values, it's a little bit of a shocker, is I have everyone in the room rate each other on the core values. And so it's all of a sudden, it's real, right? It's real. It's taking a visionary and a head of sales, and how do you if your core value is help first, and they have an open and honest conversation about, this person does a really good job at helping first, or you don't. And that's when we start tearing down those walls between us, is when the real work happens. And that is done through vulnerability, that is done through being open and honest.
Sorry, Nick, I don't want to domineer this, but your role, do you come in and do you train organizations on how to do this themselves and execute it well, or do you facilitate the meetings yourself?
Yeah, I'm teaching them how to fish. Yeah, so I call myself a teacher, facilitator, and coach. I'm teaching the tools so then they can put that into their organization. In a prior life, I spent 3 years as a consultant, right? And I was traveling the country, and I had this amazing book of business. But in that company that I worked for, they asked me to become more indispensable to the client, like dig your nails further into their business, make it so we can drive up billables and all that other stuff. I felt a little icky. I didn't like that. I loved working with them, and I felt like what I was doing was helping them drive results. But I came in with the answers. Like if I were to leave, and I did, there would be a hole missing. And when I decided to go into this practice, open up my EOS practice, I wanted the opposite thing to happen. I wanted for me to teach them everything I know, then work myself out of a job. My goal is to work with them about 2 years. Once they master those 20 tools, to then let them graduate. And if they want to keep me around and facilitate their quarterly or annual strategy sessions, I'm happy to, but my goal is to teach them the tools so they can do it themselves.
Yeah. You had this slide, the accountability chart, and that kind of implied that the business owner is the visionary. I've encountered situations where the business owner shouldn't be the visionary. Sometimes the vision owner is the integrator, and they need to find a visionary. I've also encountered situations where the business owner shouldn't be the visionary or the integrator. They want to be in product development, or they want to be in sales and customer service or customer success. is EOS able to adapt to situations where the business owner wants to hire a boss?
Absolutely. And that's pretty common, especially in family-owned businesses. I have a client who's a second-generation family business, and the client, his dad was a visionary, and he's not a visionary type, right? So the thing about EOS, it's unlocking the wisdom in the room, and it's that, we identify that as an issue, right? Right person, wrong seat. And how do we solve that issue to make sure that the company can still go on to hit its goals? There are companies out there. I spoke in a little bit of generalities. The majority of the time, 60, 70, 80% of the time, that founder is the visionary, but that's not always the case. There are examples of people who started a company and they're an integrator, right? That they're very detail driven, and they may have a hard time contemplating change, being adaptive in this ever-changing world. And when they're able to be open and honest and be vulnerable with their team that says, hey, I'm not the best at predicting the future. Let's bring in someone else who can. Yeah, thank you for that, because it's easy to speak in generalities and confuse it as absolutes. Mm-hmm. And the visionary, one more thing with the visionary is when we talk about those 5 responsibilities in the accountability chart, for the visionary, those are customizable. That's based off of their strengths. And if they need to bring in someone, and they need to sit in a different seat, in that integrator seat, then if they're the owner, then that integrator becomes customizable, and then they bring in the visionary to offset their deficiencies. Rocket fuel, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Any other questions for Nick?
Thanks.
Good job.